expert focusing on financial impact of switching to carbon farming at farmer level and the role of Rabobank in supporting farmers. So, Jeroen, I'd invite you to share your presentation, or if you're going to speak without presentation. Your presentation is titled Carbon Farming, Financing the Transition. So over to you, Jeroen.
Yeah, many thanks. You should be able now to see my screen,
yes,
right?
Perfect.
Yeah, perfect. So maybe first as a background for people who don't know Rabobank, Rabobank is a leading food and agricultural bank globally. So we really finance the whole food and agri supply chain from farm to fork, I would say. About 2 years ago, the Rabo Carbon Bank was launched, and the organization has 3 strategic goals: the removal of greenhouse gases from the atmosphere by stimulating and financing regenerative practices by farmers. The second one is reducing greenhouse gases in the F&A supply chain by facilitating and financing corporates as well to set up programs to support such a goal. And the third one is to make consumers aware of their carbon footprint and helping them and providing them insight to decrease that. But for this presentation, I will focus mainly on the regenerative practices by farmers. So our solution helps to improve soils while gaining additional income for farmers. So there are 2 activities that we are currently focusing on to generate, to remove emissions and to generate voluntary, high-quality, nature-based credits. Those are no-till and cover crops. So we work together with our pilot farmers to make that switch to regenerative farming, applying these 2 activities. And our scope for now is still actually the Netherlands and the US. So those are our primary markets, and we focus mainly on corn and soy farmers with the goal to extend that to other regions and other crops in the coming years. So what we try to accomplish at farm level is that farmers are able to sequester carbon via these activities, and we support them in that transition. So it really already starts with collaborating with agronomic advisors that set up a plan how farmers can make that switch. We take soil samples at the start, but also, of course, after a couple of years to measure soil health and also the sequestration potential. And we also have a strict monitoring, reporting and verification process in place. And I think that's something also Valerie mentioned, that which is very important to stimulate that or to claim that there are high quality credits. And then as the last step, as the Carbon Bank, what we do when those credits are generated is that we sell those credits to corporates. And the lion's share of the sale of the credits goes actually to the farmer, back to the farmer. And Rabobank also gets a percentage of it, but we cover the MRV cost of it and the soil sampling cost, etc. So in that sense, it's not in the margin on credits is really mainly for the farmer and to stimulate that transition at farmer level. Last year, we sold also our first credits to the Dutch companies, which were generated by Dutch and American farmers, and we continue to do so for the coming years and expand our activities here. Then next slide. So yeah, I think this is also a bit already mentioned in other presentations, and if the farmer is going to present later on, this will also go back. But there are multiple reasons why a farmer should or can switch to regenerative farming, including soil health, water holding capacity, providing more resiliency to the farmer. For example, reduced input costs. I will show you a farmer economic model in the next slide, but we take, for example, into account that after 3 years, your usage of fertilizer cost or pesticides can come down when applying cover crops and no-till practices. And that's where the real benefit then kicks in of switching to regenerative farming. Also, yield is has a positive impact. I will get back to that in the next slide. Furthermore, like I said, we also really want to support the farmer in this transition by collaborating with agronomic advisors to set a plan together with the farmer and to really support the farmer in the regenerative switch to regenerative farming. And the last point is that there's, like I said, an additional income for the farmer to by the sale of these carbon credits. And I think this is an interesting graph to show. First, before I start explaining this graph, I think it's very important to say that regenerative farming and farming in general is of course highly contextual. So this is just an example of what switching to regenerative farming means, and it differs of course per region, per state if you look to the ES or whatever. So it remains highly contextual. But I think what we did here, looking together with our own regenerative experts, also looking, of course, into literature and to proven cases, is that we looked at what actually the revenue and cost items are that change over time when switching to regenerative farming. And I think the items we identified, you can see in year 3, are the fertilizer savings, that's on the revenue, the pesticide savings, fuel savings, the income of the carbon credit, and the additional costs that come are, for example, in the first year's yield impact, the seed purchases for the cover crops, the different type of planting for the cover crops, and agronomic advice. And you see that we take, for example, in the first years, a yield impact into account. So this is quite a conservative scenario. In some cases, you see that there is actually not that much yield impact, but we think it's also important to show a conservative scenario. And the interesting thing is that after 3 years, there's a positive margin for the farmer. And I think it's important to see that the carbon credit, which is at the bottom of the revenue, actually supports the farmer to make this transition. It sort of takes away part of the risk or the barrier to make the switch, as it supports the revenue income of the farmer. So what we now do with our current pilot farmers is that we estimate the sequestration potential for the coming years, and we do 50%, for example, of prepayments to really convince the farmers to make that switch. And what is also interesting for Rabobank and why we're also in it is that it also provides additional lending opportunities. For example, the farmer might need new machines which they can lease from our subsidiaries. So we really, as a bank, are able to finance this transition, which a lot of parties are not able to, as they're not a bank. Other examples why it's beneficial for Rabo as well is that it results in a more resilient food and agri portfolio of the bank. It's a very large portfolio of us. So client resiliency and resiliency of our food and agri portfolio is really important. It strengthens our client relationship. We really want to be there for our clients. And of course, we also have our scope 3 targets and our net zero ambitions, as lending towards parties is also accounted to that. What I think is amazing about regenerative farming is that after a couple of years, this becomes more and more beneficial for the farmer. So there is more benefit in savings of cost of fertilizers and pesticides, and also yield comes back, or remains, but comes back at previous levels. So I think this is a very good transition to be in for Rabo, and that's what we want to support. And I think I will end it here and I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Jeroen, for that overview. I have a first question myself in terms of, can you just stop sharing the screen so we can see you better? Perfect,
Yeah.
perfect. So in terms of the measures that you selected, no-till and cover crops for this pilot, why those two in particular?
So I think twofold. So first one is proven research, and also the easiness to apply at farm level. So
Okay.
we wanted to start with activities that are in that sense okay to start with at farm level, and also to apply at maybe a certain amount of their land, so not change the whole practice at once.
Okay.
So that's actually the main reason to choose for these practices. Also, we of course make use of existing protocols which already support these type of activities. But we aim to expand this in the coming months, years. The same for the crops.
Okay, a good few questions coming in. One is to do a number of questions are to do with the MRV system and how that's working. So there's a question: how do you assess carbon sequestration? It's a long-term process. Another question on that from Claire is how does your MRV system work? The direct measures of SOC stocks over time, and then in the future, or are you using a model?
Yeah, so the first thing is that we of course also measure sort of the baseline at farm level, and the farmer needs to also provide input on the data points we need in our modeling. So in the beginning, we make an estimation of what the sequestration potential is. But in the end of the period, of course, we have to really measure what the sequestration has been. And that's also why at the beginning we, for example, now in the transition phase, only prepay 50% of the sequestration potential, because there is indeed the risk of the variation of the estimation. And we are working together with external partners in the modeling and in the whole MRV process. So that.
So from the perspective then of the credits, what volume of credits have you managed to manage so far, I suppose, and who's purchasing them?
Yeah, so in last sale, it was a couple of tens of thousands credits that were sold, and those are for now sold to corporates in the corporate clients of Rabobank, actually, that really have also a high sustainability profile. It was actually in the news. I think the two names, for example, are Vattenfall that bought our credits, but also a Green Choice, which is a green energy supplier within the Netherlands. So those are, for example, type of clients, but we really aim to sell those to the also top sustainable clients within the market.
Okay, and then an obvious follow-on question: what is the price for carbon credits sold so far, and what percentage, I suppose, breakdown goes to the farmers?
Yeah, so that's also still let's say I go back to I'm not sure if I can disclose that in this detail, but let's say that the lion's share goes to the farmer. So in that sense, on the carbon credit side, the most of the income goes to the farmer, and actually the share that Rabobank maintains is used to cover our MRV expenses, soil sampling, agronomic advice as well. I think that's it. And I think also good to mention is that the market recognizes that these type of high quality credits are more expensive than voluntary credits, for example, from a wind park somewhere else, or etc. So they are, in that so far you can say, of a general voluntary market average price, they are above that, but it's of course difficult to determine already.
Okay. In terms of the farmers themselves, then a question from Claire Chanou. How do farmers save cost on fertilizers with no-till and cover crops? Same with pesticides. Advice to reduce or better apply fertilizers incorporated in the advice for the farmers. You know, is that wider perspective covered currently, or will it be covered?
So can you repeat that last part one more time?
So in terms of I suppose associated benefits, we'd say you've again a lot of questions coming in on the two measures in terms of both cover crops and no-till. But is there a wider perspective here beyond carbon sequestration in terms of mitigating other emissions, etc.? Is that considered at the moment?
Yeah, so definitely, I think regarding other emissions, we are also looking if, for example, carbon credits can be generated from less fertilizer usage. So yes, it's in scope, but not for this pilot at the moment. So we really have narrowed our scope and also in our client base, but we want to extend that in the coming period. And I think to also go back to those fertilizer and pesticides estimations, that is of course now still and remains, I think, per farmer level really highly contextual what that exactly is going to be, and that's why we also have chosen to only see those benefits after 3 years. And for some items in P&L for farming, it's quite clear. For example, if you plant cover crops, you need, of course, the seeds and also the tools to plant it. And the same for no tillage, you save on a few expenses which you would have had if you still did tillage. So yeah, I hope this answers your question.
Yep. Your own, a couple of questions from Daniel and Brigitte in terms of the validation of the credits and that. So Daniel's question, at the end of the day, when are the credits validated and fully paid? And in a similar line of questions, you know, how do you ensure the permanence of that carbon sequestration and how many years the permanence should be guaranteed for that payment?
Yeah, so for the verification, we have a couple of years that the farmer commits to the program in a collaboration with Rabobank. So that's that's at least the period that the farmer is in the program, and that's so we measure at the beginning and the end point of that period, and that's where the verification takes place. We also work with buffer pools in the calculations, as that is of course necessary because you don't have full influence on what happens at farm level, and also just weather-wise, for example. So that those are all measures we take to address those issues.
Okay, a question from Peter in terms of Vattenfall or Green Choice. What are they actually buying? You know, are they compensating for other emissions or what else? So what do the companies get, I suppose, in return here?
Yeah, in that sense, they get one per credit 1 ton of CO2 compensated for their emissions. Okay. If that's what the question was.
Okay. I suppose in terms of other question coming in from Sarah, what is the main aim of decarbonizing supply chain pilots, reducing emissions from? Is it reducing emissions from increasing carbon sequestration? Is that what's happening, I suppose, in the background here?
Yeah, so I think it's for Rabobank. yeah, there's a lot of reasons why we should do this. Actually, it's supporting the farmers in a more resilient model, but also supporting our corporates in their quest towards net zero. We can, of course, play a financing role in that throughout their whole supply chain. So I think those are already two important points to support our clients on corporate level, but also on farmer level. And as a bank, we finance in that sense every layer. So we also are able to connect those layers also in a financial structure wise. And in addition, for Rabo, it's also interesting that it also helps in the resilience of our client portfolio, and also our targets towards scope 3 reduction.
Okay. A question from Shemal. What's your solution to supporting development effective carbon farming in poor and developing countries of Africa, Asia, and Latin America?
Yeah, so there are other initiatives in Rabobank. One is called Acorn, and they actually support smallholder farmers in those regions where they use remote sensing techniques to measure, I'm looking for the English word, but growth of, for example, trees at the ground. And they built a whole model on that, also to give those type of farmers access to the carbon market and actually this extra revenue model. So that's one. And another one is that we are also are building an initiative, and that's really in the start of pilot phase, is that we stimulate farmers to plant trees on idle land, for example, in Brazil, from which they can generate credits as well. So those are, for example, activities that activities that support smallholder farmers in those type of regions. Indeed, what I was talking about with this carbon farming is more the large-scale farmers in the US and the Netherlands. Well, the size, of course, different, but what I just mentioned is supporting the smallholder farmers.
Okay. Final couple of questions then. Just in terms of the external partners that perform the MRV and modeling, is it a third-party audit, or how is that being performed?
Yeah, so really a third party that we're working with.
Okay. And then final comment or question, and it's to do with the margin. So Sarah says that the farmer receives a margin. Shouldn't it be the other way around in terms of Rabobank receiving the margin and farmer most of the credit value?
Yeah, so I think maybe I was not clear. The farmer really gets most of the credit or margin, whatever. In that sense, it's marginal what we get. And what we get is actually used to cover those MRV costs, so that the farmer doesn't need to pay that. So I think the lion's share of the carbon credit goes to the farmer. Only the essential role, I think, and the easy role Rabobank can play is connecting the generator of the credit, which is the farmer, to corporates that want to buy it, because that's a natural networking position that the bank has in the financial system. So indeed, we are the party that gets a margin, and the farmer gets the lion's share of the carbon credit. And I think that's why it's also so nice proposition that we're working on.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeroen, for answering the many questions. There are some questions still remaining, and we'll endeavour to get those answered.